just Cape Blood. Sorry. Grabbing on the way out.
Recording and streaming.
Call the special plan commission meeting of September 21st to order. Miss X, please call the roll. Mr. Martinez, please call the roll.
Mayor Olson?
Here.
Commissioner Hogan is absent. Commissioner Butthart is absent. Commissioner Haley? City Engineer Morrow?
Here.
Alderwoman Sherry Henneman?
We have a quorum with the chair voting and participating. Please rise and join the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This is a work session of the task force on the Unified Development Ordinance rewrite. Mr. Martinez.
Good evening, Mayor, Plan Commission. This is a continuation of This is a continuation of the last session that we have in the last Plan Commission meeting about the UDO rewrite project, specifically articles from 1 to 4, the general provisions, the establishment of the districts, the standards for districts, and standard for specific uses. So we had a meeting with the consultant, Jose Levine and Birchline, about the comments that we received in the last Plan Commission meeting, and this is a new presentation to go over the comments that we received. So I will pass to Jose Levine to continue the presentation.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you to commissioners for joining us here tonight. I will start a slideshow. Is everyone able to see my screen and hear?
Yep.
Okay, great. As Regulo mentioned, the purpose of tonight is to continue where we left off a couple weeks ago and get the task force's input on the draft articles 1 through 4. We'll start tonight with a brief overview of the process so far and articles 1 through 4 as they are drafted in the commission's packet, and give a brief overview of the zoning map, and from there we'll move into some discussion. So the project so far, we are in step 4 of the overall process, draft UDO sections and review meetings with the city. We began the process about a year ago with a kickoff session and public engagement with city officials and staff and department heads to define the issues that the city wanted to address with the Unified Development Ordinance and the types of changes we wanted to make. From there, we drafted a UDO diagnosis and preliminary recommendations memo that we reviewed together as a group in February. And using that information, we've drafted the first 4 articles of the UDO based on the recommendations in that memo. So to review once more the themes that we heard from city officials, staff, and department heads at the beginning of the process, the types of changes that we'd want to make. Important themes here were to review and streamline the zoning districts with recommendations for additions, deletions, and modifications, the inclusion of user-friendly graphics that illustrate regulations and make the code easy to use, the inclusion of provisions that achieve high-quality infill and redevelopment on projects that are consistent with the context of the city, developing provisions that create development in identifiable centers within the city. Additionally, addressing development procedures, reviewing and suggesting improvements to ensure that procedures are based on the comprehensive plan zoning requirements and take into account environmental and economic impacts, and ensuring that residential and commercial development is consistent with the availability of infrastructure, public services, and limitation on resources, and promoting multimodal transportation options such as bicycle and walking. So those are the main themes that we took away with from that upfront engagement and have informed the drafting of Articles 1 through 4. So here we have the overall proposed structure and organization of the UDO by article. Tonight we have just the first 4 articles for review: general provisions, establishment of districts, district standards, and use-specific standards. And the format of this organization of the document is intended to make the document user-friendly and easy to use for staff and developers. And it's intended to model the development process itself. So beginning with the establishment of districts, that lays out the districts that the UDO delineates. If you are developing on a property in Franklin, it's important to know first which district a subject property is in. Article 3, district-specific standards. Those are the specific regulations that apply within properties or on properties within these different districts. And use-specific standards, those are regulations that apply to uses no matter where they're located. So this organization follows the development process, gets more general, starts with more general information and gets more specific.
Hey, Ruben,
Yes.
I got to tell you, I'm excited. Ask me why.
Great. Please, please let us know.
It seems like you've had 2 bottles of Red Bull. I think it's great. Thanks.
Okay. I'm glad to hear, and we're all glad to be here and go through the information. So Article 1, general provisions. This consolidates the existing UDO sections that specify title, purpose, and intent, interpretation, procedures for interpreting the ordinance, things like vested rights and severability of sections. This is all information that sets up the defensibility of the ordinance and the rules for interpreting it. We haven't made major changes to the content of these sections, just organized it together at the beginning of the UDO to set the rules up front. Article 2, establishment of districts.
Ruben, sorry.
Yes, sir.
At the last meeting, I brought up a couple of issues with Article 1. How do we want to handle that?
Yes, we have a list of revisions that we've discussed so far that include those. We'll go over in just a few minutes.
Okay.
Before we open it up for discussion, if that works.
You can tell me to push my button and be quiet. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Article 2, establishment of districts. This contains 3 different subsections, and the article really just sets forward the zoning districts that are established in the UDO and doesn't contain any more specific information than that, really. So first subsection 15.201, this lists the districts established, zoning districts established in the UDO, residential, and sorts them into residential, commercial, and mixed use, industrial and agricultural, miscellaneous, floodplain, and overlay categories, just broader categories to classify those districts. 15.202 that subsection contains a brief summary of the purpose of each district in the UDO, just sort of a elevator pitch, if you will, of what the district is intended to do. It doesn't, this section doesn't contain more specific regulations regarding allowed uses, dimensional standards, lot area, or anything similar to that. 15203 is procedures to determine the boundaries of zoning districts and zoning of annexed land. Article 3, district-specific standards. This is really gets into more of the substance of the regulations themselves and defines which sorts of rules regarding uses and the physical development of properties are applicable to certain properties here. So the article contains 6 subsections, as we can see here: bulk and dimensional standards, procedures for calculating those bulk and dimensional standards. That's the second section. Exceptions to bulk and dimensional standards for certain structures, like architectural features and things of that nature. The fourth subsection lists the permitted conditional and temporary uses that are allowed by each district. Article 5 contains specific regulations that are applicable to the St. Martin's Road Historic Business District regarding architectural features. And I'll note that in the draft of Article 3 that the task force has, there is a the next subsection is about the airport overlay district. Since sending this, we've determined that the airport overlay does not apply to any land in Franklin and wouldn't for the foreseeable future at all. It's defined in relation to FAA plans that define noise zones around General Mitchell Airfield, and none of these encompass Franklin. So we've determined at this point that those districts, that overlay district can be removed from the UDO. And we're now recommending that change from the draft that the commission has. The last subsection contains districts or regulations applicable to the floodplain districts. So we really want to focus tonight on subsections 1 and 4, bulk and dimensional standards, and permitted conditional and temporary uses. Those are really the most substantial sections that we want to get this commission's feedback on now at this point in the process. So 15301, this section contains a table that specifies the lot area, lot width, yard setbacks, building height, impervious surface coverage by zoning district. So most of this information is retained from the existing UDO, but revised for clarity and to reduce some complex layers of regulations, such as living area per dwelling unit required, gross and net density. Some of these are difficult to administer when applied to a site, or contain just overly complex layers of regulation where the purpose of the district can be achieved with these more basic regulations regarding lot area, lot width, yard setbacks, that type of thing. So most of the standards in that table are as existing in the current UDO. We have revised lot area and width standards based on an analysis that our team performed at the previous phase in the process to ensure that the lot area and width standards match the development patterns in each district, and that not too many, to reduce the rate of non-conforming lots in those districts.
Do you want to talk about that now, Ruben, or wait?
We have some discussion planned at the end of the presentation,
Okay.
if that works, so we can circle back on all of this.
Okay.
If that works. 15304, this subsection specifies the permitted, conditional, accessory, and temporary uses allowed by zoning district. That information is also displayed in a table, and the permit procedure and whether a use is allowed is signified by the different letters in the table. The P shows permitted by right. The C indicates conditional use permit required. T indicates temporary use permit, and a blank space means that the use is prohibited in the zoning district. The list of uses is also contained in that table, the list of regulated uses in that left-hand column. The current list is based on the NAICS code. It's highly specific, and this is in the current UDO now. Highly specific allows uses that are substantially different from one another, substantially the same in different ways. And the proposed district in the draft of Article 3 has more general use categories that group together similar types of uses that should be allowed in the same way, just to make the ordinance easier to find, for a user to find which type of use is allowed in any specific district. This table does call out specific uses that the city has expressed an interest in regulating differently, or that are commonly important to regulate slightly differently. So as an example, existing retail categories in the current UDO. The current UDO contains highly specific retail related use categories like bakery products, men's and boys suits and coats, beverages, women's footwear, except for athletic, leather gloves and mittens. Those would now be encompassed within the more general retail use categories. We have just
There's
a couple
an especially awesome one on millinery. Just saying.
Millinery, is that intended for people like me?
Hats.
So that's,
And now that Queen Elizabeth
I knew that.
II's funeral is done, yeah. It's really awesome. Oleo manufacturing, it's awesome.
So these are, as JP said, contained within more general use categories where these things can be allowed really similarly. There isn't a substantial difference in the off-site impacts between a bakery, say, and a clothing establishment. There are some uses that are called out in that use table that are practical to regulate more specifically, things like funeral homes, animal boarding facilities, hotels, uses that motels, that is certainly a good one to make sure is called out specifically, where there is a reason to regulate those specifically and allow them by district perhaps differently than something like general service or general retail. So that's an overview of Article 3, the information there. Article 4, this is use-specific standards now. This is regulations that apply to specific uses regardless of their location. There's 14 subsections to this article. The uses are categorized by type here, making them a little easier for users to find, say, a duplex within the residential use specific standards section. So really the purpose of this article is to lay out detailed standards that control off-site impacts, things like traffic, noise, hours of operation, location of certain features, the appearance of how a site can be developed for these different uses, and to specify certain regulations for those uses. We've retained in this article several use-specific standards that are in the existing UDO for cemeteries, campgrounds, landfill and disposal operations, heliports, helistops, and home occupations, and revise these for clarity just a little bit and to reflect some modern day best practices. We've also included some new use specific standards for duplexes, townhomes, multifamily buildings, short-term rentals, accessory dwelling units, drive-throughs, and other uses that are new and established in Article 3. So that is a bit of an overview on Article 4. Now we can move in to discuss the draft zoning map that is included. The purpose of the changes to the maps really is what came to sort of implement what came out of the upfront engagement to streamline the number of districts that serve similar purpose in the UDO and to match match the districts where the existing development patterns and uses are similar. Many of the districts we've retitled based on the desired use and development pattern in those districts from what they are in the current UDO. There's not a real substantial change in the regulation of those districts. It's more just to retitle the districts to lay out more clearly what they do. Overall, there's a reduction from 38 districts in the existing UDO to 20 in the proposed zoning map. And our team has done some work to identify where the changes result in a substantial change in regulation from the existing districts and would result in a substantial a rezoning in effect of those parcels. And we've counted 2,443 of Franklin's 13,215 parcels. Here we have a diagram that shows just a summary of the existing districts and the proposed districts here on the right. So you can see the proposed RSE, RSR, RM, VR, and RC districts on the right. And the lines connecting them show which parcels in the existing districts are essentially being folded into the proposed districts on the right here. So for example, in the RC on the bottom right, there are at least some parcels in the existing R1, R1E, R3, R8, and RC1, those districts on the left there that are getting folded into that new RC district in the consolidation. Similarly, we have a sort of summary diagram here showing where at least some parcels in the existing districts are going into the new proposed districts in the proposed zoning map. So for the LI, that's the light industrial districts, you can see in the bottom right there are really parcels from only two districts, the M1 and the M2, that are being folded into that light industrial districts. That's essentially taking the two existing industrial districts and consolidating those into the one light industrial district.
Ruben?
Yes, sir.
I'm just thinking, without thinking this through, the light industrial designation, that might provide a definition that will cause some heartache in the future. I'm wondering if there's a better designation than light industrial. Manufacturing is similarly termed. I don't know what we'd call it, but I'm thinking of something less argumentative than light industrial, because define light industrial as opposed to heavy industrial, as opposed to just plain industrial. So I throw that out there. If there's a way to change that, that would be good. Also, if you want to keep your nomenclature the same, we've got the village residential, and here you've got it as business St. Martin's. So you might want to just make it
Okay.
business
There's
village.
two, there's one residential and one business.
Yeah, but the nomenclature changes. So make it business village.
Business. Yes, we can definitely review the district titles in greater detail here as we go. The existing title, I believe, is Village Business. That's that VB over on the left.
Right.
And as we've drafted it here, we've switched the title to Business St. Martin's. It's essentially the same district, but we've just shifted the title to reflect that it is applied to that area of the community specifically. And there's a couple of B2 parcels, I believe, that are going into that now. So certainly if that's, we're glad to revisit the title of any of these, or specifically the light industrial more as we go.
So Ruben, this is Glenn. I'm going to jump in here. One of my major comments when I read through this, I don't understand why there's general floodplain, flood fringe, and floodway. Someone beat me to the question last time. Why not just have a overlay district to designate floodways? Looks like all of them that you're trying to designate are, quite honest, at least at a glance, are owned by the county park system. Why not just call it parkland, and then we have an overlay district? So in case you say did have some sort of a commercial lot, that the backside was a floodway and the front, they could use as developable, it's not encumbering the entire lot, and they don't have to come in for rezoning to be able to use the front of their lot. So why not just have an overlay district that designates a different flooding?
I'd be happy to address that.
Thank you, JB.
So the state's the state's model floodplain ordinance designates the three zones: floodway, floodplain, flood fringe. The city absolutely can and structure that as an overlay district, so that the underlying district applies, and then what's in the flood, in a designated flood.
From us relative to these slides today, or can we move on to the next item? And this is your contract, so you tell us.
We'd like to get the task force's overall ideas on the zoning map. This is just to kind of cover our bases again once more, what's really going on. Glad to go through this more rapidly if you'd like to.
Well, I'm just concerned that we have limited amount of time overall, and the technology is not helping us. So my big comment is we have to be careful when we use the term rezone, that in fact is what's going to be happening, or can we reclassify it as reclassification? I don't want to get us into a legal battle out of the chute if we don't have to.
Mm-hmm. I think what we're showing here is that most of the districts in the proposed map are based on an existing district in the existing UDO, where there's just some kind of minor text change.
Maximum flexibility to the landowners in that area as possible. Is that fair, Kevin? That take care of what you need?
That's historically been that. Doesn't mean we need to continue that way, but either we
Okay.
want mixed use or we don't.
And they just want to be
I
left
think-
alone, so, you know.
Okay, and I think this is a Ruben and Jackie question more than your
And take it, JB.
fearless water person.
So the thinking behind the proposed districts, the village business and the village residents, is to better reflect the development that's on the ground currently. So the existing uses, and then the distinction between the commercial areas and the more residential portions of that village area. We can certainly, based on your policy direction, reconsolidate those districts, make it that mixed use area. That is definitely a policy decision for the city. Without an up-to-date land use plan or comprehensive plan, we are just basing our recommendations on existing development and direction we've received from staff. But we definitely would benefit from your direction on the preferred policy approach for this area.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
and just
make
to-
sure that they can put some service and retail in the residential part of that district.
Or is it business that allows residential?
Yeah, it's 6 of one, half dozen the other. Either allow residential in the business zoning part of it, or allow retail and service in the residential part of it. That's
Certainly,
it.
we can make that adjustment.
Okay, good. Next.
Okay.
Well, just for everyone's reference, the definition of prime agricultural district is in C4 as proposed. We've already talked about that. Under C1, there's a circulation system should. That's what I was getting at before. We're not in intent anymore. Should is not definitive enough. I mean, it either shall or it will or it must. I'm not going to. Section C, number 1, BP Business Park District. Circulation systems should be integrated. I think we can all agree with that, but will we require it or not? Again, that was the point I was trying to make in the beginning, is when we're talking about intent, flowery language is fine. When we get into the code, it should be definitive so that we're not arguing with staff over what that word means.
Mm-hmm. And we, just to jump in, we do have, we'll have more specific regulations in later articles, like the general development standards, to require pedestrian amenities or encourage those types of amenities as the city sees fit there. So a requirement, I believe, is what we had discussed before. We're glad to match the district's sort of purpose and intent statement to be more firm on those types of requirements.
Okay.
But those regulations are coming in later articles.
Okay. Anything else, Kevin?
Section E, we have already had this discussion about floodplains versus parkland and doing an overlay. I think we beat that one up. Split zoning of lots prohibited except for parcels in, those would be the floodplain designation. So that is appropriate, I believe. Well, I think the legal minds would tell us you need something there in case.
All right. I think we're ready to go on to 3.
Okay, great.
Although
Article-
I'm just gonna, we can talk about it later, but we just skipped over the official zoning map. I've got still issues with that. It's inaccurate from base mapping on up. I've tried to point that out. We've got churches zoned as agricultural and state-owned lands that are shown as developable for residential. I can show specific things. We don't need to do that now. But when I look at the proposed zoning map, there's significant inaccuracies in it. And it stems from the base zoning, base mapping, I'm sorry. Franklin's records are wrong because they're not looking at every real estate transaction that happens out there. We've got significant parcels of land owned by the DNR. They're being shown as residential. I think that's going to happen. So that's another effort. Again, I had marked up a map showing all the ones I was aware of, but the zoning map as proposed is based on some erroneous assumptions. And I'd be glad to help straighten those out, but there's significant numbers of them. It, as has been said, the proposed zoning should not only reflect where we're proposing to go, but what's actually on the ground. That's probably not going to change. So
Yeah, we were happy to make those updates if you'd like to perhaps mark up a map.
I
and
did
send
that 3 months ago. I'm not sure what the planning manager did with that map. And I suppose I create.
Have you visited his office, his former office lately?
No, I haven't been down there.
It's
But I
drawings
took
from
the
one
existing
end to
zoning map and annotated each of the parcels that are parkland, deed restricted, DNR. Again, you got St. Martin Tours Church shown as conservation residence. I don't think that's what's happening there.
So just to clarify, if I can, the specific uses of these properties are very likely allowed within the zoning districts that they are in. So for example, places of worship are proposed to be allowed in residential districts. So the designation of that church in the conservation residential or an agricultural district would not be inconsistent or would not make that church non-conforming with the new district. Similarly, with a DNR-owned property or parkland or deed-restricted land, we certainly can rezone those to better reflect those existing conditions. But the current zoning in a residential district or something similar that would indicate it's available for development would not necessarily make it so.
I just think the map should reflect reality. I thought I heard concurrence on that. There's things on the ground that are that way and aren't going to change, then the proposed zoning should be what it is. I mean, why isn't a church institutional?
If I may, one of the reasons that it's not is to avoid what we call spot zone, what could be called spot zoning. To have a consistent functional, now from the standpoint of a future land use map or a current land use map and a future land use map, you're absolutely right. You would want to show the church as an institutional use. That's for land use and planning purposes. When you get to zoning, creating single parcel actual zoning district designations that simply reflect what's there can create the kind of district proliferation and then problems with rezoning or problems with setbacks. And just for a practical administration of a code, let's take that church as an example again. If you have an institutional district that requires a certain setback, that might be really different from the setback pattern in that more local district where the church is located next to residential uses and maybe small commercial. So by having the church allowed as a use within that broader zoning district, as an allowed use along with the things that are around it, then you can have standards for setbacks or landscaping or front yards that make sense for that area for all the different uses. Whereas if you made the church a separate use, then you've got to try to link up those setbacks and landscape standards with the area around it. You're going to get more and more proliferation of requirements and more potential for something to go wrong. So for that reason, it really is consistently a better practice to have allowable uses within, multiple different types of allowable uses. For a land use map, you're correct. Absolutely.
Well, again, I fully understand the difference, and I understand the perils of spot zoning. Don't support it in any way. But our proposed zoning should reflect also what's on the ground. There are some things that we can't change no matter how much we want them to. And to call them something else in the names of conformity, I mean, back to the church example, the whole back half of the property is a cemetery. We're going to put residential property in there. Will that ever change? So all I'm saying is the proposed zoning, unless we're proposing to change something radically, it should reflect what it already is in its current use.
Right,
And
and,
it's just
and
what
I'm
you
going to
did.
argue, Kevin, that it does. But you've got multiple uses allowed within that district, which would include church, cemetery, and other. That doesn't mean that someone's going to propose residential in a cemetery. But again, unless I'm not understanding where this line would go except to create more and more and more individual districts for existing uses.
I'm not suggesting new uses. You've got a park and you've got an institutional. That's what they should be, one or the other, if that's in fact what they are. If you show it as residential, a developer will walk in here one day and say, I want to build residential properties on it. You know it's going to happen.
Well, with the specific example, we have to be careful because there's a portion of that land that the church is probably interested in selling off.
Which is fine, then that portion should be shown, not
For residential.
if there's a piece of that. I'm not disagreeing with that. We got into that example, but right now, as best I can tell, it's being shown as either conservation residence.
It's residential conservation, yeah. But again, Kevin, the
agriculture.
reason it's that way is because for the longest time, we didn't recognize institutional zoning. And there was nothing in the city zoned institutional.
But we're introducing
So-
it now. We got it.
So anyway, all
Where it
right.
should be.
Okay, what else? Okay, let's move on.
Okay, for Article 3, we had heard to add a reference to the fence standards in the exception to bulk and dimensional standards. The fence standards will live in Article 5 to be shown later, but people would like to, might think to locate those within the bulk exceptions to bulk and dimensional standards. So just to add a reference to that section in Article 5. Also, footnote 3 in Table 15.301A, we need to change the language in there from maximum to minimum for that rear yard setback for garages. That was just an error on our part. In Article 3, we had gone over changing terminology from special use to conditional use per state statute. That is something we had attempted to do previously, but had missed a few references of that throughout. So we're just going to change it to conditional use to make it consistent with the state statute.
Ruben?
Yes.
Fences, I'm sorry, I don't want to dwell on this. Fences need to be allowed to be higher in non-residential districts. They can't be, currently, I think we're restricted to 6 feet. We need to allow up to 10 or so for screening purposes and security.
Okay. In non-residential.
Right.
Going back to that.
Hold on,
footnote
Kevin,
3,
hold on.
Thank you. On that footnote 3, can we insert a word in front of setback? Minimum setback. Is it side yard setback, front yard setback? I don't know what that means in this context. Is it a setback from the house? Footnote 3, page 1 of 34. I'm in Article 3, first page of it. You understand what I'm saying? It just says minimum setback of 10 feet shall be allowed. Setback
Okay.
from the street, from the residence. I'm saying, what is the setback of?
Yeah, from the rear property line, I believe.
Yeah,
it would
rear
be.
property line side, just let's define what it is. Then a more generic thing, in the beginning of your presentation, you suggested that our standing UDO is based on NAICS. That's wrong. We're based on SIC codes. Unfortunately, we went through an effort to try and convert all of those, and it might make sense to do that, but currently, this is based, our current UDO is based on SIC codes, correct?
Correct.
Yes, that is correct.
Change that slide. And then we'll get into the whole question of, do we make the effort? And I like what you said, that most of these you have sort of converted to NAICS, but it's a formidable task that we should be addressing in some meaningful way. Hopefully this will clean all that up, because we haven't been real happy with the SIC codes for reasons you well understand.
Okay, guys.
Okay.
Onward. I'm on page 2 of 34, 15302B. As measured from the front lot line, shouldn't it be measured at the front lot line? I think that's significant.
Could you repeat the section, please?
15302B, lot widths for lots about a cul-de-sac. Last part of the sentence, as measured from the front lot line. I believe it should be measured at the front lot line.
So the idea with this lot widths for lots that abut a cul-de-sac, so rather than, because they're a pie-shaped lot,
I get it.
and it's not, okay, so then we would not measure it at the lot line. We would measure it at the distance into the lot line where you're going to be doing the development. So you'd have that reduction in that overall allowed width.
I understand the concept. I'm talking semantics here. Wouldn't that line be measured at the front lot line, that distance?
Kevin, it may not sit well with you, but the term of art is to measure from a point in the way zoning is typically drafted and that any
Okay.
court would interpret.
And then I would just suggest in the philosophical level that this area C on yard setbacks would be a great place for some graphics.
Certainly.
Certainly, yep. We're planning to do that.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, if you have a comment, please go ahead.
No, I was just going to move on. The next page, item D, height. We're measuring the height of the building from the finished lot grade along the building frontage. Doesn't that really belong as the finished floor elevation of the structure? Because yards, and I understand we're saying mean, but the height of the house is from the first floor to the top of the roof, generally. If the house,
But this is,
the whole building is
But
jacked up
this is-
4 feet above grade, the height of the building still hasn't changed, height of the roof.
right. So what this is trying to do is avoid instances where someone may be trying to maybe stand out from the neighbors, especially in a more commercial setting, by building up the ground underneath their property in order to have greater height. Although the building itself wouldn't be taller or have greater height, it would have greater height in comparison to its neighbors. So that's why you would measure at the lot grade rather than at the ground floor.
If you want. I don't think anybody's got a lot grade that's higher than their floor elevation, but, okay. Number 2, under 15303, special structures. It's as approved by the Plan Commission and/or Architectural Board. Which one is it? When is it? And is that what we want? Is it one or the other?
So this is language from your current ordinance. We'd be
I
happy
get
to
it.
revise it.
That's why I'm bringing it up for discussion here. Exceptions can be made as approved by the Plan Commission and/or Architectural Board.
Okay, I'm looking for staff recommendation on this. Specifically regular, because you handle both groups.
And you don't need to give me the answer right now, but we ought to clarify it.
So if anybody object to having just staff make the recommendation on this and move on? Okay, all right. Staff will give you the wording on that.
Okay.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
So if I could jump in, number 3, the next one. I appreciate that towers and such are exempt because that's generally my things. But what about a private tower? Like somebody wants to put a cell tower in their backyard. Is that exempt?
You mean an amateur radio tower?
No, a cell tower. Big money.
That would be a commercial structure.
Glenn, speak for yourself, but I thought we were talking about towers in a residential setting.
Yeah, but I understand what you're saying, and I'm not being argumentative, but I would not be able to put a cell tower on my half-acre lot in a residential subdivision. I just can't. It's not permitted, right?
Again, I bring these things up because we keep talking, we want clarity
Well,
and preciseness, so it's not.
Last tower we had was the church on Rawson, and assuming it was a residential district.
It was, I think, institutional. And that's what, but it was a commercial venture. I think to speak to yours is if I put my amateur radio tower up in my backyard.
Or a windmill.
Or a windmill, yeah. Or,
This says nothing about commercial or not-for-profit or residential uses. We Energies is, they return a profit to their shareholders.
Well, they've got poles in my yard.
Yeah, so I mean, the question is, what do you do with the cell tower question? Does that belong there? Is that figured somewhere else? Or
So to help clarify, the section that we're looking at is in the height exceptions section. So this is just saying if these different essential services, utilities, water towers, et cetera, if those are allowed in the district, then they are exempt from the height restrictions of that district. So then if we go to the use table, we can see where those different utility uses are allowed in the community. And then they would be subject to either a conditional use permit process or be permitted by right. I believe they are all conditional in the community.
so telecom tower is, I see it on middle of page 5, CCCCC. Okay.
Right.
So that would,
This only deals with the height. It doesn't have any bearing on where they're allowed.
Okay.
exactly.
Yep.
Kevin or anyone else, did you have anything else on A? I got a question on B.
No, go ahead.
B1, I've seen some very fancy decks around Franklin. I can imagine if you're not allowed to have anything extend more than 6 feet into a yard, I would think that there'd be we'd see a lot of those variance cases come forth. So
this is limited to stairs and landings. You're talking about 4.
They're allowed to extend into the side yards. I think what this is getting at.
You can't have a 6-foot wide stairway. That's really what I'm saying. Or 2 3-footers. Side by side.
I read this, the intention was to allow for some extensions. The house needs to be set back 30 feet from the side yard, but you could have a bay window or something projecting into that space.
all right.
That's the way I read it for the writers.
That's correct.
I have a question too that goes along with that.
Hold on. They can't hear you. Oh, they can.
A question that goes along with that, with the yard exceptions, how do ramps fall in here if a home has to have a wheelchair ramp? Do we address that?
We can take a closer reading, and if not, we can certainly add it in.
Yeah. Let's make sure they can comply with ADA requirements.
Right.
Glenn brought it up, so I'll dovetail into that. On paragraph 4, B4, decks and terraces and patios. We're limiting decks and terraces and patios to 10 feet from the house. That wouldn't work in my yard.
It can project 10 feet into a required yard. If your house does not take up your entire buildable area, then your deck can be much larger. So if you're required to have a 30-foot rear yard setback, then you can be, your deck could be 20 feet from the property line, right? So you're allowed to be 10 feet into that required rear yard. But if the rear of your house is 50 feet from the property line, then you could have a 30-foot deck, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but this says
Right.
may project a maximum of 10 feet from the house.
No,
They project a maximum of 10 feet into any required yard.
into a required yard. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, Mr. Mayor, this is intended to deal with places that have smaller lots near each other. It basically, the controlling phrase here is at the end, that you can't be any closer than 5 feet with a structure to your property line, usually side or rear. And that's to ensure that you don't have people putting a deck and a hot tub on top of the property line.
Got it.
That's the controlling piece here.
But unfortunately, there's the language that says I can only go 10 feet into the lot.
No,
Into the
into a
yard.
required yard,
Required yard.
into a required yard.
setback.
So,
Right.
so I didn't pick up on that. I think a
All right,
picture
so
would be
then I
nice.
suggest that the terminology be changed to be the standard terminology of into any required setback. My landscaper would have read this and said, sorry, Steve, you can't build your patio.
I don't think that's what it means either. On a setback, so they're saying if your building is allowed for, say, 2,000 square feet, and you only use 1,500 square feet, you have 500 square feet before you even start approaching that line.
And you guys can explain this to me all day long, but the purpose in this UDO rewrite is to make it clear. This is not clear.
Pictures. I need pictures.
Pictures.
We can certainly change it to into any required yard setback.
Okay,
That's how it's written here in the table.
Yeah.
okay. And add some pictures. That's a Wisconsin term, Pitchurs, pictures. Okay,
What you pour your beer out of.
next, we want to avoid silence at all costs.
15304 on the next page. A5, it says, if the proposed use is not listed in the tables, the zoning administrator shall determine if the use is substantially similar. Is that the desire of the city? I have no problems with it.
I would
But
say
basically,
yes.
you're giving it all to the zoning administrator.
The
And
zoning,
not the plan commission.
Re-
Right.
Remember that this is an important one. Remember that any decision of the zoning administrator can be appealed to the appointed body.
There you go.
So it's the front line, but not the final word. Ultimately, common council would be the final word. But some communities want plan commissions always to make that determination. So it's an important question. But just remember that decisions like that are appealable without a lot of cost or effort to the resident.
See if the front door's open. I'm okay with zoning administrator.
Just want to make sure we get it right. These are the things we've discussed in the past, had problems with. In the chart under B, duplex, we've got a conditional use in the RSR. Is that what we want? Maybe you can give us a rationale for why that's proposed as conditional. I'm not questioning it, I'm just trying to make sure we get it right.
You're saying as opposed to allowed.
Permitted.
Right.
I'm sure there's a reason.
So the suburban residential district currently, and staff, please correct me if I'm wrong, does not consider anything other than single-family detached dwellings as allowed uses. So that would be just single family homes. So we're proposing that the town consider duplexes in certain circumstances when they're appropriate, and that could be considered through a conditional use process.
Why in the RSR category and not others?
So the RSR is a bit higher density than the RC and the RSE. If the council believes that it is appropriate to have duplexes in other districts, we can certainly make that change. Again, without a recently updated comprehensive plan, we are sort of making some policy assumptions or guesses and are hoping for your direction before we finalize these things.
In the chart, community living 1 to 15, is that appropriate for state law, state and federal law? And making them permitted uses, I can tell you the community would want them conditional.
We can certainly double check state statute to ensure that it's the 1 to 15
I thought it was 1 to
persons
8.
that has to be permitted. We can certainly double check that and ensure we are restricting those as much as the state allows.
Okay, mixed use, okay, that's all fine. You got more? I got more.
Onward.
Next page, recreation, amusement, and lodging. Every one of those should be conditional,
Conditional.
every one of them.
Okay, but how do we regulate a short-term rental as an Airbnb? We're gonna get pushback on that.
Well, but all they gotta do is get licensed. But we cannot, we can't have it a permitted use without knowing about it for a whole bunch of reasons.
We already sort of do.
Yeah, well, that's because we're not on top of it. Now's the time to fix it.
You know, and I guess what has sort of become the standard across the country concerning the Airbnb, Vrbo, short-term rentals in terms of zoning.
I wish there were
Use.
any form of standard. It's all over the map, from registries and stringent permitting and enforcement to, we hear it's a thing.
I suggest we make it conditional, and let's have the discussion at the time we do public hearings and have the council decide, but permitted is not permitted.
But I think we should do a little research too before we just throw it out there and have the discussion at the plan commission, you know.
For sure. What's the definition of community garden?
Community garden would be the use, the principal use of a parcel for gardening purposes. So it would allow for that use without there being a principal building or structure established on the lot.
Yeah, I don't know that that should be a P there. I'm not going to die on the sword on this one, but crop production in the conservancy district, telecommunications, okay. So I don't know, you guys offer your opinion on community gardens, but Mary.
I think, so there's a little bit of a distinction to draw if we want to get into the weeds on agricultural stuff. It's common to rent micro farms, so it might not be, it's still an agricultural crop production establishment, but is it being divided amongst multiple people? That would be a question in my mind. And in agricultural land uses, that seems like it would be appropriate, but it is also a policy decision. Like, you know, is someone subletting the property to someone else? We don't currently regulate that, so.
Does beekeeping come under community garden?
We have a separate ordinance under the municipal code related to animal permits and bees, so.
Okay.
Yep.
I would say let's make it conditional, and then the council can change it back. You know, and let the record reflect that Commissioner Hogan has joined us at 8:05. Welcome, Commissioner. Okay.
Okay, onward for the same chart, we go down a couple lines to accessory,
Still on page 5.
still on page 5. top chart, accessory dwelling. This is what we were touched on before. What's the difference between an attached and an internal? And I know that there is a definition, but if it's attached, it's conditional. If it's internal, it's permitted. What's the difference?
So a internal accessory dwelling would be completely within the footprint of the existing dwelling. So the principal dwelling on the parcel. So it would be, let's say you're converting your basement or your attic to an accessory dwelling, that would be considered internal. And because it doesn't impact the exterior appearance of the use in any way, we are proposing that that be permitted by right. Whereas an attached accessory dwelling would be similar to an addition to a home. So we're looking at that as having a greater impact, potential impact on neighborhood character, quality, if there isn't an additional level of review for those instances.
Well, again, that's sort of where I was going before. Attached, there's no difference. If, for example, somebody came in and wanted to put an addition on their house that happens to have a bedroom and a kitchenette on it, it's attached. It's internal. It's a building permit issue. It's not a use issue.
Mm-hmm.
So,
You can certainly make the change if you would prefer.
well, one way it's conditional and the other way it's permitted. I don't think that there's a difference between attached or internal.
How about
Recommend that they all be conditional.
Okay, I'm good with that. Likewise with.
So are you saying that anyone who wants to put an addition on their house would have to get a conditional use permit?
for an accessory dwelling?
Accessory dwelling.
Okay.
That's another garage, a
So
shed.
it should, they should,
Gotcha,
they should
okay.
both be permitted,
Hmm?
is my,
Let's see,
Thought on
everybody
this.
coming in, every public building.
Just a suggestion. A lot of communities, if it is in fact rearranging the interior of your house to create an accessory unit, that is not a conditional use, which requires a public hearing and a lot of time and grief. I do have some communities that require the conditional use if the accessory apartment is in a detached or in an accessory structure rather than within the main dwelling. Folks don't tend to like being told that if they want to just rearrange their interior that they have to actually go through a public hearing. So
I would tend to agree with that.
You don't want to do
I think they should all be permitted.
We don't want to do that.
All right, you changed from conditional to
I
permanent.
misspoke. I meant permitted.
Yeah,
I was reading the wrong
okay.
line.
Awesome.
That's internal.
Attached and internal, all permitted.
Yes.
And detached?
So detached would be like converting your garage into a livable space. That would be
You know, or just building a whole new residence, property, mother-in-law's
Micro house.
that'd be
coach
conditional.
house.
That'd be conditional.
Wait a minute. Everybody's talking and nobody's listening to what each other's saying. No. So the suggestion here is that internal dwelling accessory structures are permitted. I don't have an issue with that.
Yes.
Accessory structures, which means attached or detached, are permitted. So if you want to build a mother-in-law suite, you can do it, whether it's attached to the building or not.
That's what I'm suggesting. It should be permitted.
Yeah.
Okay, as long as we're all cool, say it plainly so everybody understands, right? Now,
Detached. attached.
understand that the illustration here is a mother-in-law suite. What happens if I want to build an I'm into woodworking and I put my lathe and my router and all of that into an accessory structure, and I make a noise.
that's a
all the-
that's a home
Yeah.
occupation.
That's-
That is a
Yeah.
totally separate category of use.
Artisan.
No, I'm not
Artisan
selling any
workshop.
of this stuff. I'm
That's
making
artisan
furniture for
It
myself.
could also be considered an artisan workshop.
Okay, and that is also permitted. So I'm
Yep.
just saying, be careful of what you ask for. Think of this, Regula's got an opinion, Marion's got an opinion.
Well,
I'm happy.
in the existing UDO, home occupations are permitted in all residential districts, subject to a home occupation permit, but they are permitted.
Okay. Hogan, you had an opinion.
I mean, those accessory structures will have regulations in terms of size and setback and everything like that. So my idea is as long as that accessory dwelling or structure meets those requirements, it should be permitted. If they want something larger with a smaller setback, whatever, then yes, it would have to come before a public hearing.
Do we have those standards set out someplace?
Yes, those are included in Article 4.
Okay, that's enough of that.
Enough of that.
So, solar energy collection systems canopy, I don't know what that means. Ground mounted, should not be permitted, should be conditional. Roof mounted, I'm okay with being permitted. So the first two sections, canopy, not knowing what that is, and ground mounted, I believe should all be conditional.
So canopy you'd often see in parking lots, especially for multifamily. So it's essentially
Then I'm okay
a
with
covered.
Carport.
Yeah, then I'm okay with that one, just ground mounted should be conditional, in my view.
Okay, any other comments on the permitted special and temporary uses?
So I have a question about the temporary construction related. So if is this just a construction trailer for anything, even the guy building the subdivision? Or is it a guy with a construction trailer for the, because he's working on a road project? Or is this, what do you mean construction? Will they have to come and get a permit for that?
Be a temporary use permit, administrative permit.
Do we do that now?
Currently, if it's associated with a building permit, it doesn't require a permit.
So, but under this, if they got permission to build some apartment buildings and the guy has a construction trailer out front, that would be okay under the.
That is permitted without a permit, without a specific permit for the trailer.
Right, but it is regulated. So I think that's an important distinction. So the review process is pretty limited, but like,
So a T is temporary use. Does that require a permit?
it does not require a permit, but it is regulated under the ordinances. So like a construction trailer, we don't issue a permit, but
Well, they
if there was an issue with
They
it,
have to get temporary use.
mhm,
For this. So
it's allowed as a
I
temporary
would
use.
suggest maybe construction related, as long as it's there, on site it's permitted. But so, for example, you don't want someone to set up a construction office or construction trailer for project across town. But if it's there on site because they're building apartment buildings, they need a construction trailer or trailers, I would suggest that should be permitted. So
We can certainly include in use-specific standards that if it's approved as a part of the building permit, a temporary use permit would not be required.
That works. Do we want governmental uses permitted for wherever they want in a business district?
Explain, please.
Fire station in the middle of a business park that's occupying really valuable land and not really a good use of the parcel for a fire station too,
but the land's free.
but the land's free? I say all of that's conditional.
So governmental uses we have as a conditional use in the I district.
Okay.
And I propose governmental uses are conditional in business districts as well. Make us work for our takings.
So currently they're proposed to be prohibited in the B
Oh.
districts, but we want to make them
Next
conditional.
Next item.
Wait, so the IRS couldn't come and build an office building in our today and,
They couldn't build one, but they could occupy one.
Well, they could occupy. That's an office use. We're talking about an actual governmental facility, more like
okay.
library, fire
Okay.
department.
All right,
Exactly.
Gotcha, I'm good.
good as it is.
Well, so I'm going to jump ahead a couple pages, but it relates to that issue right there. So when I look at the DPW building, so I'm looking at page 7 of 34. Right, DPW building is zoned I, but yet pretty much everything I do at my DPW building is prohibited. You know, we basically have the recycle center. We actually sell fuel. It's not a quick trip, but we sell fuel to the county and the schools. We do heavy machinery, mechanics. We do storage. We do everything that it's not allowed in industrial. So I would suggest we either look at industrial, or maybe we look at my DPW and say it's something else.
So that would be considered a governmental use, and the activities that you're referencing would be approved as a part of the conditional use permit. What this is restricting is private industry from establishing in the institutional district.
I see.
And Glenn, anything that you're doing at DPW, unless you're doing something really weird out there, would fall under reasonable, usual, and customary uses of a public works building.
We try to be creative with it, how we do things. Yeah.
Okay,
Just one quick one there. We're on that institutional. On institutional property, education facility and government uses are both conditional. Is that what we want, or do we want those to
institutional, where are you looking?
bottom of the page?
Page 534.
Page 5.
It's acceptable everywhere except institutional, and there it's conditional. I don't quite understand.
Oh, you
why it's
backed up.
prohibited.
No, it's prohibited.
It's prohibited.
It's prohibited.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's permitted everywhere except it's conditional in the
And
institution.
that's what we want?
Well-
Because isn't that where government and educational facilities go, is in your
Right.
institutional
That's,
zoning?
that's why it's conditional there.
You want them to come in and talk about it.
Yeah, of course. So on the next page, if we can skip back and keep in order here, under recreation, amusement, and lodging, here we go again. Short-term rental is permitted in St. Martin's, agricultural districts, and parks. That's shouldn't be permitted at all, I don't believe. What was that mumble?
And what is the rationale for that?
I'm sorry, Marion, we're not able to hear you.
Whoops.
Oh, yeah.
What are we talking about again?
Marion's just mumbling. It was Alderwoman Hanneman that had the question.
What is the rationale for permitting short-term rentals in the agricultural districts?
Because there are current residences. I'm sorry, Marion, I wasn't able to hear you. You can please go ahead if you have a response.
Go ahead, Julie.
There are residences that are allowed in those districts, in the St. Martin's district to be more of a mixed use setting where you have the residences above the retail. So we were proposing that short-term rentals be allowed where residences are allowed.
Okay, then I would make it conditional.
Certainly a policy decision for the city.
We see the perspective from the Chicago area in this document, which is not bad. It's just the way it is. Okay, so on the next page, top of the page, restaurant delivery carryout, you do not have them in the mixed use district or in the St. Martin's district. I think restaurants ought to be, delivery and carryout ought to be permitted in all districts, in all of those districts.
Especially since you have them there already.
That's correct. Similarly, fast casual in the St. Martin's, because that's all of those restaurants are, is fast casual.
In that instance, I would recommend we just consolidate all restaurant uses to just plain old restaurant and take out the distinction between the various forms.
I think that works for me.
Yeah, I've never understood the difference between fast food and fast casual.
I'm fine with that too.
One, you can wear a t-shirt, the other one, you gotta wear a collared shirt. That's the Chicago influence. Okay,
That's fashion, not zoning.
My last one on the page is self-service storage facility under industrial is permitted. I don't suggest that self-service storage ought to be permitted anywhere. It ought to be conditional. Nobody objects? There you go. That's it for me on that page. You want me to go to the next one?
Bear with me just a minute. In industrial, I am thinking under distribution facility, how does, and I'm just using this as an example, our new business in TID 8, Saputo. It is a food packaging and distribution facility, but it's only a conditional use in the light industrial and not permitted anywhere else. And so as we look at a lot of the uses that we might see going into TID 8, are we being too stringent on what is not allowed there?
Marion?
TID 8 is also a planned development district, and I don't believe it's expected to change under the proposed map. So it required a special use because of the distribution and trucking aspect of it. But
It's
a PDD.
not permitted at all in any other.
Distribution?
And I'm only bringing this up because the idea of doing this is to ultimately move away from PDD usage. So then are we going to find ourselves, and not that I want to have a big trucking terminal, that's not what I'm getting at, but because of the marketplace being what it is, and we're seeing, especially along the interstate, a lot of internet distribution facilities. Are we going to be seeing a lot more requests for rezoning to light industrial, i.e. along 27th Street? If that's the only place that any sort of distribution facility would be allowed as a conditional use.
The land use, the current future land use map for that area, I would suggest that this is also a land use discussion, does not allow for that generally. So the PDD did in the section technically to the back. So,
Right. But anything and anywhere outside of that PDD, we would not allow any sort of distribution facility.
as proposed,
Just-
yeah.
Just an additional comment, in the existing UDO, general warehousing is only permitted in the N1 district, that is a manufacturing district.
Okay.
And just for the consultant's benefit, any discussion of what we would term cross-dock facilities, pure freight handling, we don't want. The Saputo manufacturing that we're talking about is a cheese manufacturing company that's now going to do processing. They're going to do grading, cutting, packaging, and the distribution that they're talking about is merely finished goods waiting to get out to their distribution network. So it's not really a distribution facility either. We do have some flex buildings going in, but there's typically value added to the product that's in those buildings. So it's not a cross-dock operation, so to speak, so. Okay, anything else? Where are we at here? Accessories? Donation drop boxes, conditional use if they're permitted at all.
I agree there.
Including the agricultural district.
And also the solar energy ground mounted again, conditional.
Yep. And seasonal sales, temporary. I don't know why I circled that. Other than it may be in the St. Martin's district as well as the P district as well. So that ought to all be temporary. And that's all I've got on the charts.
Can you explain to me a food truck and the food truck court? How do they, so you have a food truck court that can get permitted. Does that mean the food truck itself still has to get temporary use permits? Or if they're within the food truck court, can you just say, no, we would allow, up to 6 food trucks?
So the food truck court would be a permanent area where food trucks could be parked. It'd be like a
Right.
principal use of a parcel, whereas food truck as a temporary use would be parked in the right of way, in a parking lot, not as a principal use, but as a temporary use. So if there is a as a food truck court, those food trucks would not be required to receive a temporary use permit for each time they want to park at that food truck court. That would all be as a part of that food truck court use. This is more related to food trucks in parking lots.
Okay.
So if you're going to go to the Menards and you see a taco truck, that is the type of food truck that we're referring to as temporary.
So it wouldn't matter if it's Glenn's Tacos or Regulo's Fettuccine, whatever. It basically, they could come and go to the food court and not have to get a permit. Is that what you're saying?
It would be up to the owner of the food court.
Right, okay.
And the health department. Hogan. Hold on.
To park on the road?
Pardon me?
Do we allow them to park on the road?
They'd have to get a temporary permit.
On the road.
So for example,
That would be covered in the right-of-way standards. That would be outside of the UDO.
But they go to the Rock and have unless they want to call their parking lot a food truck court, they would have to get a permit every time that anybody shows up there.
And they are not allowed in our parks.
So you couldn't pull up on Rawson Avenue and park on the side of the road and do it
Not legal.
like they do in Milwaukee.
Right.
If you go down 16th Street, you got 15 of them on the side of the road where the cars are parked too, But okay, I see
And
what
if
I
you had a
was just-
Guzikowski family reunion at the park, you couldn't bring a food truck in. Even though I've seen them there.
Not anymore. Supposed to.
Mary?
I have a question for the group and also for the consultants. What differentiates a solar farm from solar energy collection systems? Like, what is the scale limit? And I will note that we have had a request from Milwaukee County to put a solar energy generation station in a park. And I think that we could anticipate seeing that for lands that are designated as institutional park or limited industrial in the future. So where do we draw the line is really my question.
So the line that we've drawn between solar farm and ground-mounted solar energy collection system is whether or not it's a principal use of the lot. So solar farm would be that lot's principal use is these solar energy collection systems, whereas ground-mounted would be an accessory use. So it would be accessory to a park, accessory to a industrial user, something like that.
So I would put to you that some of the lots that this could be related to, like if you look at the map of what lands the county owns, although it's all contiguous, there's multiple lots there. So an individual lot could end up having the solar farm be the principal use. So again, it's a question, how do we want to address that?
I say it's conditional use and you got to come and justify it. Wait.
I would agree.
That makes sense to me, but.
What?
That makes sense to me. I want to make clear that, especially in the context of parkland, that we could find a lot where it's a primary use, potentially, depending on how things develop, so.
Anything else
Yeah, we
on
can certainly
St.
do that.
Martin's?
Yes.
Kevin?
In two spots, I'm looking at B1 and then B2. Are those minimum or maximums? We're just stating a dimension for square footage. Width, depth, window width, window height, sill height. That
We say the following minimum standards shall apply. Sentence above.
Oh, you're correct. Thank you.
Does this reflect what exists today? Does anybody know?
Well, from a reality standpoint, most of St. Martin's, all the building frontages, the parking is all in the street right of way.
Yep.
So I was thinking twice about awnings projecting out. This can make it work, but they have no property, very little front property.
Correct. Yeah.
So we're telling people that they have to do something in the street right of way potentially.
Fortunately, it's city streets now, so.
Yep.
Okay, so nothing, airport overlay, that goes away. Patty, you didn't know that. That doesn't apply to us, so that whole section on page 9.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Kevin.
It was on St. Martin's, D, item D, parking location. Off-street parking spaces and lots shall be located to the rear or interior side of the principal building. That's not possible in
That's
St.
not
Martin's.
happening.
Good intentions, but there physically isn't the space.
Next time you
get-
guys come up,
Yeah, we'll take you to St. Martin's.
Look at a Wegner's.
go have a nice piece of,
Labor Day weekend. So.
So as much as it would be nice to have parking lots and spaces to the rear or interior, it's not physically possible. There's some parking, but they're parking out front as well.
So this standard would apply to new development or redevelopment in the area. So the idea was if the parking is located at the side or rear, it helps it become more of a pedestrian-oriented area as we interpreted the intention for that district to be. We can certainly eliminate it if it doesn't seem feasible, but it would apply only to new development or redevelopment in that area.
Then I suppose it's okay. The reality is it probably won't happen, but if somebody can figure it out, that's great.
However, if we don't have it codified here, would a new business coming in be required the number of parking spaces that would be required in other zoning areas with other new businesses?
Know that this new UDO draft have maximum parking standards, not minimum. Mhm. But that is in the next article, so we'll discuss it.
And the reality is it may just limit future potential developments because everything there is infill and there's not a lot of land.
okay, airport overlays, doesn't apply. Issues on the flood fringe and all the rest of that stuff, I didn't even bother looking at it
No,
because.
but we talked about that.
Overlay.
The concept being that parcel has a base zoning and we do flood as overlay.
Okay. Yeah, consultants I've kind of taken over, but that's what I do. Kind of what I do. The one point is on page 25, there's a reference here to zoning administrator, and then under what appears to be A5, departmental regional office, that needs to be defined as to what that is.
I'm sorry, where are we?
Page 25, towards the bottom, under item 5. What's the departmental regional office?
Page 25 under item 5.
25?
Yep,
Down
I
at the
got it.
bottom.
I got it.
Submit copies of the following items to the departmental regional office. Well, okay,
Fix that one.
we can send it to the head office.
Pick me. No, that's defined towards the end. That's Wisconsin DNR.
Okay.
Yep.
Just
So
Fix it.
where do they go? Planning?
Similarly on the next page, first paragraph. It's kind of what I do. I find these things, right?
But what are we replacing Department Regional Office with?
We'll just
DNR
have
regional
them
office.
do it. DNR. I think on the document, that's it for me. Anybody else? That's it for me for Article 3.
4? That's it for me on 3.
Sherry? Glenn?
I'm good.
Okay, we're done with 3, I think.
Okay.
Then why don't we just open up Article 4 and we can go through it as a group?
Sure. I don't know how late you guys want to go, but I don't have a life, so it's okay.
I think just like we've been doing for Article 3, if you all have comments.
My first comment is until page 4.
Okay, page 4. Page 4. Glenn?
So I guess the short-term rental is where I marked it. And I've been doing a lot of research on short-term rentals and personal reasons. I'm looking to do one, but I think I would rather have a short-term rental next door than somebody just renting a house next door. I mean, you have someone that fixes it up enough to get a renter, and then they really don't maintain it. You got a renter that doesn't maintain it until it comes time to rent it again. Short-term rental, they almost have to keep it like a hotel, keep it as best they can. People that stay there, you do hear some horror stories, but I would imagine there's a million times more horror stories with bad renters. But for the most part, if you do Airbnb or VRBO or whatever, you get graded as you leave too. So there's I wouldn't think you'd have a lot of police calls kinds of stuff. Otherwise, there are some people that don't care, I guess. But so anyway, having said that, I guess there is a lot of hype about short-term rentals. People are fearful of them, but I don't know that it's grounded in anything. So I guess why really try to almost prohibit them? Allow them, but in reality, you're trying to prohibit them with some of these topics. That's my thought.
Control is a better word than prohibit.
Yeah, I would agree. And to your point on number 5, under the short-term rentals, that they shall be subject to the hotel tax provisions, how do we even collect that and audit that?
I do believe that like Airbnb has a method to do that. For example, I'm looking at doing one in the city of Milwaukee. I think Milwaukee has when I finally, if I ever get the rehab done, I'll go down to Milwaukee and I'll file for a permit, and they collect them just like everybody else.
Yep. Currently, that tax is collected by the clerk's office.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
On
just tempted to be.
On short-term rental, we've got some blanks. Do we want to weigh in?
Yes.
Maximum number of guests per bedroom, maximum minimum days.
I think number 1 would be appropriate to set guests per bedroom. That's appropriate.
2 guests per bedroom.
Minimum, maximum days. I don't know what the purpose of that one is.
What's your definition of short-term? Because
Usually there's quite a lot of case law and a fairly strict definition that no unit occupied more than 30 consecutive days. After the 31st consecutive day, it becomes a permanent dwelling.
and actually, I
Some
think
communities do shorter than that for short-term rentals. They'll do 15.
So what would be the purpose for someone to do that? Because if they were going to stay there more than 30 days, I mean, in reality, you could just call them
It gets around the rental code.
they don't have to pay hotel motel room tax. They've got a consistent source of revenue now, and none of the zoning code applies. They do what they want.
I would suggest to you there's lots of month-to-month rentals going on underneath our noses that we don't even know any about, that don't have to pay any of those things.
I 100% agree with you, and there's an initiative right now in the city of Franklin to crack down on all of them. Letter going out by the end of the week.
Oh, okay.
That's one more meeting that I didn't invite you to because it really didn't impact you.
That's all right.
So I think our code says maximum of 1 month. that accounts for February and some leap time. So duration, I guess, minimum of 1 day, right?
Yeah.
And
No
So many
early rentals
communities will
allowed.
choose. Many communities will choose to do more than 1 day. I know in Oak Creek, we established I believe it was a 5 to 7 day minimum to avoid any party houses where folks are just having a really short term weekend stay. And it could be a negative for neighbors. I do believe that the state of Wisconsin has a statute established that the maximum minimum that the municipalities are able to establish is 7 days. So that's the longest minimum that you are able to establish. And then, like JB had said, a maximum of 30 days. That's what keeps it as a short-term rental.
so I would say for number one, maximum of 2 guests per bedroom. That doesn't account for parents with little kids, but
You call it 4?
But then again, parents with little kids, we don't call them humans anyway. I'm teasing. I don't want to get any letters and phone calls, all right? But I would say 2, and you look the other way. 2 adult guests, there you go. And then duration, 5-day minimum, because if I'm here on business, and I typically wouldn't do this, but if I was here on business, I'm here Monday through Friday, I'm out of here on Saturday, so that present, and then a maximum of 1 month.
30 days?
Well, we don't do 30 days because of February and leap year and that kind of stuff. You're not, hold on. No, it's live. There we go. Regulo,
You're on page 4.
can you put
20.
Wilhelm on, please? No, on the sound system, microphone.
For families who maybe come in for a weekend graduation. You know, you don't necessarily want to, not everybody. I understand wanting to discourage the party house thing. I'm just thinking about a guy that lives down the street from me and he rents his out as an Airbnb. Never have any issues with it. I know people who come and stayed at his house for 2 or 3 nights for a weekend, and I think by and large that's 3 is reasonable.
And again, just that, I think the party house is maybe not so much of a concern because, you know, if I rent my house out as a party house, they're going to tear it up. I don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to check and you know what, there's all kinds of websites that tell me how to screen my applicants. You don't get somebody who's brand new, those kinds of things. And then if you do go into someone's house and you tear it up, no one after that is going to rent to you because I can see those kinds of comments about you. So I appreciate the concern, but I think it's maybe a false concern.
Okay, short-term rental for a maximum of how many days per calendar year?
No.
So it was 3 in 1 month, you said?
She said a minimum of 3
A minimum
days.
of 3 days,
Yep.
maximum of 30.
Maximum of a month.
How are you going to figure that?
Oh, 1 month.
I would recommend 30 days in case there's an instance where someone starts renting in the middle of the month. And then it would be more difficult to define what that month would be if we don't have a day description.
I agree with that.
Well, okay, that's fine. I just went through this with our attorneys on an enforcement issue, so we'll get the proper terminology. It may be 30 days is 1 month is defined as 30 days. There's a legal term of art on this one. That's the issue here. But let's move forward.
How many times a
I
year?
don't think you need. And it's
Well, it's
so
a hotel if they're renting it consistently, right?
well, you collect off of that.
I mean, it's your home. You're supposed to live in it sometime.
No, it's a lot of
Max,
I
what do
don't
we
plan to
want?
live in
Maximum
one
of
of
how many days calendar year?
But again, if you're renting it out every day, or whatever the maximums are, it's now a hotel, not a house. So somebody put a number to this, but I don't think unfettered rentals is what we want, especially in the city of Franklin.
What's common to our consultants?
It varies community by community. Some people will do, especially in the area where we live, have it be like a half of a year you're allowed, so that to account for snowbirds and that type of
That's what I'm thinking.
resident. Other communities, especially in communities where they're really having housing affordability issues and are more tourist oriented, will go as low as like 90 days to ensure that there is still single family homes and permanent residences available for residents. I would think half of a year would make sense for the community, so it's not a nuisance to
days.
neighbors.
Not a whole number.
180 days.
The guy who lives down the street from you, does he rent out? a couple-
Okay, 180 days. We'll let the common council wrestle
No.
with it.
There you go.
What else do we got on here? Adult establishments located 1,000 yards from another, 1,000 feet.
5,000 feet.
Put a number in it.
Those are your current standards. So I would recommend if they're not causing any issue currently, that we leave them as they are. There is a First Amendment issue with adult establishments. The city does have to accommodate them somewhere in the community. So if we want to increase the separation, we would want to do an analysis to ensure that there's still viable area in the community to accommodate them.
How many are we required to accommodate?
I mean, there has to be a reasonable location in the community where an adult use could be located.
I mean, we already have one that we know that's licensed as that.
Let's not poke the bear.
Yeah, okay, I'll leave
All right.
it. I'll leave
Okay,
it.
service use standards.
I just,
Kevin?
on food court, food truck court, I remember reading somewhere else in here that we limited it to one elsewhere. Let's just make sure that it's not conflicting with something else we included.
What's the, I'm
You
sorry,
got
Kevin.
page 6.
Maximum number of food trucks allowed on site shall depend on the lot size, which seems reasonable, but I think somewhere in my previous readings on food truck is limited to one.
So that's the difference between food truck court and food truck as a temporary use.
Okay.
So as a temporary use, only one food truck would be allowed on a property at one time, whereas in a food truck court, that maximum number would be figured out through the site plan process.
Makes sense.
So we do have one property, The Rock, that maybe it's part of their PDD, I don't know, but they have, okay. I have a question on that same section, so this would be page 6, top of the page, number 5. Minimum of 2 permanent restrooms. Basically, so if you only have one food truck, that seems appropriate. If you were to, say, have something with 8 food trucks, 2 restrooms, I think maybe you should discuss number of, say, stalls kind of thing.
Well, I think that's a health department thing. And it's also part of the building codes.
And then we'll discuss parking somewhere else too, or something like that.
Parking is the next session.
Section, okay, right.
Parking for food truck courts.
No, the parking standards. Yeah.
We're about to get into one of the areas that I want to talk about, but I want to give the general scenario and see where we go to fix it. We have businesses using their service vehicles and other vehicles as billboards, parking them in the front of the lot, on the street, instead of getting sign permits and that kind of thing. Where do we go to regulate that?
Be the sign ordinance. That's the chapter 6 that'll be delivered to you all in the next set of chapters.
Could one of you make a note of that as an issue?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. All right.
Mhm.
Sorry.
It is within your authority to just say no to that.
The next page on page 7.
Oh, wait a minute. Anybody got anything on vehicles?
I do. Where do we address junk vehicle storage?
I believe that would be in the property maintenance code.
The salvage
But as-
operation or you got junk
Yeah,
cars on
let's
your-
say a salvage operation such that we have in the southwest corner of the city.
We have
We are
several-
proposing,
we have one junkyard or one or two, same spot. And then
I got
Patty's
several
neighbor.
in 27th
And then we have a auto recycler, well, it's not really a recycler, reseller of damaged vehicles. So we need to regulate those a little bit more closely in the future. And then we'll have to deal with Patty's neighbor.
yes, we can certainly add those as uses in the use table if they're not included currently.
Okay.
We'll double check that.
Vehicle fuel sales,
Electric charging stations.
that's where I'm going, yep.
Oh, wait. Oh, go on.
So we have to accommodate that somehow. That's not in any of these sections.
Is that a parking?
We are proposing to allow electric vehicle charging stations in parking lots. So that was currently included in Article 5 in the off-street parking and loading standards.
I'm okay with that.
C9 on page 7, and it shows up in a lot of other or at least a couple other places too. So I don't understand why you're having drainage from things that could be carrying oils and such to go to gravel, grass, or other planted areas instead. And I appreciate that we don't want them in our storm drainage, but should they at least go through like maybe an oil water separator or something? Why would you want oil to go out to the ground and just soak into the ground?
Glenn, right now there's no standard for managing the drainage from these types of areas. So if there are circumstances where you would want an oil water separator, we should note that. Language to that effect would be something like, in the event there's concern about the introduction of oil, the city engineer shall review the plan and may recommend an oil water separator. Generally, if you have a dumpster area and you contain it so that the dumpster juice is going over some riprap, through some grass on its way to, anything but a surface water or direct to a storm drain, that's sort of the best you can do, absent either a sanitary connection or some kind of separator. I don't know that the city wants to get in the business of requiring a separator underneath every dumpster storage area, though I'm sure there are folks at DNR that would think that's an awesome idea.
So I would suggest to you, this isn't a dumpster. You're talking about major automotive repair areas. We do require curb and gutters around parking lots and such. It comes up later, so how would they drain?
Yeah. I think if the language for the automotive areas should include review by the city engineer and possibly oil water separators, that's fine.
So for example, an auto zone, that might be appropriate where you expect people are going to be out there working on their cars.
Yeah, I mean, Glenn, I love stormwater more than any normal person should. I have not in my travels seen MS4 issues from like an automotive use unless it's actually a fueling or some kind of a truck terminal.
Well, so a gas station, I would think that would be an appropriate place for an oil water separator because the chances
Yep.
spilled gasoline would be highly
Yeah.
likely.
But that's covered under, that would be covered under your NR 151 permit. Because there are specific standards for that type of use that can, for fueling stations. I mean, obviously it's fine to add that in here.
Also, on the next page, you say drainage from vehicle fuel sales areas shall be directed to gravel, grass, or other planted areas. So I guess I'd have to check with my
Well,
staff. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if it's the city's right now, it's not really addressed. If it's the city's preference that that you have city engineer review for drainage from from major automotive repair, fine. So if you want, yeah, I mean, that's C, and we can change number 8 to have city engineer review of any of those uses and potential for a separator where appropriate.
Or at
What-
least
what I would-
or at least a system to make sure it doesn't flush on downstream. So, for example, the Copart facility that just went in, we had a lot of discussion on, what happens if vehicle fluids leak. We made sure that we talked about making sure there's a clay liner and some of those kinds of things to keep it. So,
Okay.
I think it should be looked at.
Okay.
Maybe a case
We'll
by case.
talk-
Yeah.
Sure. I would just say that auto sales, rental, and service, your typical, do you have how many dealerships are within Franklin?
We have a few.
5 or 6,
Okay.
Lovers Lane area.
and a few
Yeah.
that are not licensed.
Not licensed.
27th Street?
I would just add some language that says they'll capture all runoff,
No,
capture and filter.
respectfully, Mr. Mayor, I don't think that's, I don't think that could be challenging.
Okay, so, all right, let me fix it then.
well-
Fix it.
Well, and so, talked about other communities. So I came from Indiana. Their MS4, we did require what I call swirly gigs for, a lot of those commercial situations where you'd expect to have oil leaking or gasoline leaking. And so basically it acts like if you can think of like a septic tank. So it would trap any sort of floatables
Sure.
that would come out. So
Hey, Glenn,
If the other,
9 o'clock, let's go.
Yep,
I was gonna say, if you-
Glenn will draft something for there that will have a city engineer review and oil water separator or similar where you deem it appropriate.
Swirly gig? Is
All
that
right.
a technical term?
it is. It swirls around.
It is.
Anybody have anything on 8?
That was 9 o'clock.
9? Page 9? We got a lot of airports and heliports here.
So actually, I
Self-service storage facility.
apparently we flew by the one. There's a lot of discussion here about campgrounds and windmills, so forth. I can't imagine. I mean, I love to camp out in tents. I did it this past weekend, but I can't imagine someone saying, "Hey, let's go to Franklin and camp out." But even if they did and someone wanted to put a campground here, I can't imagine that we would say, let's take some valuable real estate and turn it into a permanent campground. So I guess the question is all the campground discussion really necessary? It takes up a lot of pages.
We could camp in our new park.
Well, Hogan and Haley remember the Harley 100th. There was talk of a campground on the county sports complex.
Well, that's a temporary use kind of thing, right? It's not like a permanent campground that this is talking about.
I don't know. I say leave it in because we got lots of land to develop on the south side of the community.
Would you be in favor of turning one of those large plots of lands into a campground?
No, but I want to have control of it. I don't want squatters' rights going on either.
Okay.
I'm not a big wind farm guy. but at least we got language for it, right? Anybody? I'm on page 12. Anything on 13? Trying to get us moving through.
Yeah, accessory uses, specific standards.
We're on page 13, bottom of the page.
Yep.
Is there a minimum?
A minimum for what?
Attached or internal accessory dwelling units shall be allowed per lot, 1. Of a minimum of an acre, or do we want to set a minimum threshold on that? Do we want to allow 5?
Isn't that controlled by the maximum allowable
Square footage,
square footage? So,
but these are accessory dwellings, of course.
isn't our staff impressed that I said something like that? Come on. Don't I get any credit anymore?
It's not after 9 o'clock, you know.
Okay.
Don't impress me.
We're doing employee evaluations, you know.
No, I was thinking that song.
On A2 under accessory dwellings, what if it's a pre-existing standalone detached garage?
So I'm sorry, you're looking at number 5.
Point 2, under A, accessory dwelling, detached,
Yep.
attached. A standalone detached garage and standalone detached accessory building shall not be allowed on a lot. What if they're pre-existing?
So if they have an existing detached garage, their option is to either convert that garage to an accessory dwelling or build their accessory dwelling as an attached or internal unit.
Okay, then we move down to 4, where we've got a 720 square feet on properties in excess of 40. I think I made this comment before. 7 by 10, the size of a car parking space. Seems small to me.
But on the next page,
Yes, I'm just saying, will we even want anything that small?
oh,
I mean, that's 7 by 10.
I'll say when I've lived in 400 square foot apartments that were completely fine. So they are livable units, certainly. And I would say 700 and 900 square feet is actually on the larger side for an accessory dwelling unit.
But it's a maximum size. I don't think.
Correct.
that's
So
what we're
the
at.
idea would be we want to ensure that the accessory dwelling remains accessory to the principal dwelling on the property. So we wouldn't want it to be too large. We can certainly make it based on perhaps a percent of the lot area, percent of the size of the principal dwelling. If we think 720 is a perhaps arbitrary limit.
That was just my comment. It's small.
Just to mention that,
Sorry.
just to mention that this maximum area is the standard that we have in the current UDO for accessory structures.
They're accessory dwelling structures, though. No, and the accessory structures, we just modified that language to allow a sliding scale on larger properties. Yep.
Correct. In some southern district, correct. You're right. Yeah.
Well, we want to reflect that in here, but maximum size, why bother? So if you got a 40,000 square foot property, the biggest you can build is 7 by 10. And 900 square feet on properties more than 40,000, that's 10 by 9. There needs to be some sort of, not bigger than the primary residence or based upon acreage. Got lots of acreage, it can be bigger.
yeah, again, it's an it's a place for your mother-in-law or your kid coming home from college after you.
I understand it. These are maximums. I just think they're low.
Why don't we pull together some examples from other communities and we
Yes.
can send that to you for consideration.
Pictures are good. We keep going back to that theme. Pictures are
And
good.
a sliding scale, based upon the size of the property makes sense too.
Okay.
25% accessory dwelling internal, 25% of the floor area. That should be pretty good for you. Accessory retail, 25%. Okay. Anybody else? I'm
I
on
have,
artisan workshops.
I've got a couple things there.
Alderman?
And I'm just bringing it for discussion. The sale of goods or materials on site shall be prohibited, as well as number 7, the outdoor display of any of their goods. You know, I'm thinking wood carvers, pottery people, who, and I'm thinking maybe in the village area, if they have a artisan workshop and they want to sort of sell their wares out of their home.
So the artisan workshop is an accessory use in residential areas. In our non-residential areas, we do have artisan manufacturing as a use in the industrial district, and that would have a retail component. This is meant to be sort of like a hobby workshop in someone's garage or someone's basement, where you wouldn't want customers stopping by to purchase goods.
Well, but I think the Alderman brings up a good point. In village residential, village business, that might be an appropriate spot to allow for artisan workshop and somebody coming to pick up a very nice piece of pottery or something like that.
Artwork.
So in those districts, we have artisan manufacturing as an allowed use, which would be essentially what you are describing.
Okay.
So let's just say, for an example, and I'm taking this because of my daughter's next door neighbor in another city, who is an accomplished artist. Her workshop is in her home. A few times a year, she has a gallery night where she invites people to come to her home. They have wine and cheese and displays hers and other artists' work, and people can purchase that artwork. Yeah, are we saying that's not allowed?
What we're saying is that you can't have a retail establishment out of your home. So you can't have customers dropping by to purchase goods. But just like the city wouldn't currently restrict someone from having a party where they may or may not be selling things at that party, this artisan workshop would not restrict that type of activity.
Okay.
And just so you all understand, Alderwoman Hanneman has a history in the state of Illinois, which is why she asked that question about gallery nights.
Actually, I'm talking about New York.
Well, but it comes from the Illinois people here, the frou-frou Illinois people. Okay, what else?
And I'm sorry,
Kevin?
just stepping back into the accessory structures again in 5D. This is contingent on existing active agricultural use. That's not the way the most recent amendment reads. I would just suggest strike active agricultural.
We can certainly make that change.
5D, accessory structures may exceed. We just did this change a while back. It should not be restricted to active agriculture. It needs to meet the other standards.
That's a good point.
Okay.
So Alderwoman Hammond brings up a good point. Have we covered the folks that sell their corn and eggs and everything else? That'd just be a seasonal.
But do they all have to get a permit?
Well, that is also protected by the right to farm laws.
Oh,
Yeah. So we cannot prohibit that with local zoning.
okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay, drive-through? ATMs?
Did we say that we are prohibiting donation drop boxes?
There are conditional use.
Conditional use.
Item number 1 is very good. We went through. 2 drop boxes, no more than 3 drop boxes. I'd get rid of number 3. Yeah, they're all.
Would that standard be no more than 2 donation drop boxes shall be permitted, period?
Yeah, that's my suggestion. The minute that happens.
Oh, yeah, on 27th Street all the
Are you
time.
kidding me?
Oh, yeah, I know. I know.
We happen to have 2 donation facilities. We've got a Goodwill and I can't account for people being lazy.
Does this apply, this does not apply to our unused medication drop boxes or our retired flag drop boxes?
That's government purpose, I think.
Okay.
Glenn's right. Yeah.
Okay.
"40 feet from a residential drive." I don't know that we can put this in there, but there needs to be some regulation that these are emptied regularly and no materials outside of them.
Mhm.
Which is why you control them and say, you need a permit so we know who to yell at. No. It's whoever feels like puts them out there. They're unregulated in the city right now, which is why they're all over the place. Okay. Does the consultant have any language regarding maintenance and the emptying and maintenance of those boxes?
I mean, we do say the name and 24-hour telephone number of the owner-operator of the drop box must be permanently affixed.
Maintenance, anytime we say the word maintenance, it gets into more of a municipal code issue than zoning. Zoning should, yeah.
And we do say prohibiting the placement of items outside the box on number 10.
Okay. Okay. I like number 2 on the home-based business. Vehicular traffic, nuisance causing, yeah, okay, I'm good. I haven't read it yet, but outdoor dining, is that less restrictive than we are now?
We don't regulate outdoor dining now in the
Well,
US.
yeah, we do. We don't let people do it, generally.
We have it as permitted.
But we don't have any standards.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's silent. UDO is silent on that. Current UDO.
I spent the first 4 years of my career here as mayor trying to negotiate through all of these people that wanted to do outdoor dining. And then when COVID hit, everybody wanted to do outdoor dining. It was like pulling teeth. Square footage, oh, you got to give up parking spaces, you need bathrooms. It was a nightmare. We got to encourage outdoor dining, I think.
I would suggest that it should be subject to either a minor site plan or site plan approval. If it's separate from a proposed new use or new structure, to add that here. And then also to allow it on decks, not just paved surfaces.
My comment is, I don't think it should be paved at all. It needs to be hard. It could be packed in stone. I would just write paved.
That's fine. And whatever it is, it's staff review. Outdoor display, it's another one of my pet peeves, but I'll leave it alone. Canopies, ground.
For display areas, only hard surface.
Doesn't do well for St. Martin's Fair or the Severians or, yeah, so
They're prohibiting partially paved or unpaved outdoor display area.
I don't think that's necessary. Where is that, Kevin?
A3 shall be surfaced with an improved hard surface material will be fine. Be partially paved or shall be prohibited.
Oh, Kevin, your mic's not on, so nobody heard that. Okay, say that again, Kevin.
I'm sorry. K3, permanent outdoor display or sale areas shall be surfaced with an approved hard surface material, period. Strike the second sentence.
We have our share of outdoor fairs that are done on lawns and gravel driveways and canopy one's okay. Solar collect, M4, I suggest an M5. Solar collection systems shall not be visible from any roadway.
They're on the roof.
This is ground mounted.
Okay. I
Ground mounted.
thought we said no to ground mounted, period. Or was it conditional?
It was conditional. If we want to do roof mounted, they should probably be complementary, colored complementary to the roof.
They're all black.
That's what I thought too.
Right, but if you got a white roof or a light gray roof,
Who has
light gray, sure. I did say white, but I meant light gray.
They're increasing, there's a lot of pushback on limitations of that nature. Solar, it's sort of considered a little bit part of the expected aesthetic at this point. That could be challenging, the roof mounted.
Some nice residential developments where every house in there
I don't
has
have a problem with roof mounted solar. I don't have a problem with it. I just don't want the contrast of a light colored roof with a solar panel on it.
no different than window shutters.
Oh, cut it. Now you're stressed. All right, I'm ready to move on.
Me
Jeez.
too.
Ladders on the roof?
What's that for emergency
Your,
egress?
your neighbor. Okay,
Okay.
food trucks.
Food truck. Again, we're requiring the trucks to have full public improvements, including curb, gutter, and sidewalk.
and an access drive?
Yeah, and an access drive. I don't know where that's gonna happen. You
Yeah,
might get lucky with the Target parking lot, but,
yeah, I don't see one being enforceable.
so it could just be terminated, have all full public improvements or utilities.
But that could include sewer and a bathroom?
But food trucks don't have that.
Mm-mm.
You grab your sandwich and you go home. Yeah, I think we got to delete number one, unless you can provide us justification for why it's there.
Or some other language. If it- full
Mainly so it's not located on an improved site.
Understood, but these are temporary uses. We don't want everybody paving the world just to be in there.
No, so the food truck wouldn't be required to pave the site, install curb and gutter and sidewalk and an access drive. It's saying they can only locate on sites that already have these things. So an existing parking lot, for example.
The idea is not to have food trucks drive onto lawns or vegetated areas and damage them.
That's what we do.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's pretty much what we do with our food trucks around here.
Okay, I mean, if it's the city's decision, I mean, especially, gravel can be fine.
We could say that it is preferred, if you wish.
But we already require pave all the parking lots and access drive. So if this is
Thinking
a
of the
food
Rock.
truck going to an existing use, so the all the parking and access are already paved, required by the UDO.
Understood. I'm thinking about things like the Rock. They're parking on the grass using the adjacent sidewalks and such.
Well, let's read this. Sites for food trucks are required to have full public improvements, including curb, gutter, sidewalk, and an access drive. Now that I read that out loud, I don't have a particular issue except for curb and gutter and sidewalk.
And I'm going to play devil's advocate on that one, because it had been rumored that some of the motels along 27th Street had wanted to bring in some food trucks.
Yeah.
And neighbors got wind of it and were calling me, even though I had not heard of anything about it. But the neighbors did not want food trucks coming into those motels behind their homes.
So I would, thank you. I don't mean what you said.
Oh, but just, there are no sidewalks there. I don't think there's much curb and gutter along that state highway. So,
So my recommendation is delete the words curb, gutter, sidewalk, and the word and.
Then what does full public improvements mean? And again, these are temporary uses. Why don't we just say that because they're already coming to us for approval, just say that they must be ADA accessible is really the issue you're after.
You guys, I need to strike it as far as I'm concerned, but yeah, trying to. All right, strike it. Yep. I'm not sure I agree with number 3. And what is?
Well, that was the reference I made before.
for the Rock, right.
Right.
Well,
but
even
that's-
so, if there's two food trucks on Menards parking lot, who cares?
Well, just change the number. 3.
Or more than one food truck will require a conditional use.
But if it's a temporary use, you wouldn't want to go in for conditional use approval.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Each truck requires it. So
Right.
you might look at the sites, there's only 1, 2, 3 here. I think it could coordinate.
It's a temporary use. Why don't we just strike it?
I'm
And
okay
we're
with
already
that.
saying that they cannot occupy more than 4 parking stalls or 650 square feet of parking area. So we're sort of regulating how many could be in the Menards parking lot. And my guess is Menards is probably regulating that as well, how many they'd want in their parking lot.
All right, so unless somebody jumps up and down, Kevin says delete it.
I'm fine with that.
3.
One per lot.
1 and 3 are gone.
And then I'm just going to have issues with number 9.
Well, back up. You got issues with number 6 too.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did.
Yes, you do. Oh, it says
Yeah.
improved or paved, so we're okay. It's gravel. Because what do we care if they put tables and chairs on a grass?
No, and what do we care? We're requiring tables, chairs, and trash recycling receptacles shall not be retained on site overnight. That sounds a little onerous. So they got to pack up all the portable chairs, the garbage cans and everything and take them off site? That's what we want?
So it keeps it a temporary use.
Yeah.
Yes.
People can sit in the grass.
I think I could cash it.
Yeah, I lost that one, Kevin.
I don't care. It's not about winning. I just don't see it happening.
Then it needs to be enforced, so I don't know. Seasonal sales, 20% of parking spaces. I don't know if that's realistic. Especially during spring sales of merchandise. Regular, how's that work with the garden sales?
They've all got
No,
huge
they-
lots.
This this number 2 is new. It's not in the current UDO, to my knowledge.
We need to do some evaluation on item number 2, B2.
I do wonder now that we are proposing parking maximums rather than parking minimums, if 2 is even relevant.
I'm good with that.
Bingo.
What that means for the people listening is strike it. Okay, have we come to the end?
We have.
We're doing 1, 2, 3, and 4, and that's the
For
end of
today,
4.
we're done.
Oh, yeah, oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, thanks. All right, anything
For today,
else?
we're done.
Consultants, anything else for us?
No, I think we have
That
our
was-
marching orders. We know how to update the ordinance. We'll circle back with Regulo and Marion, confirm that we are all on the same page and are hearing the same revisions. And then we'll get these articles revised and back to you all to take a second look at, along with Articles 5 and 6, which will have a very similar meeting to this in the coming months or weeks.
November. Yeah.
And is it possible for us to get the revisions in a electronic form so that we can do red line strikeout for you? After you've made your edits?
Yes, certainly.
Because
Yep.
right now we're getting paper copies and that gets a bit onerous as well.
Yeah,
And
certainly. We've been sending PDFs, so we are happy to perhaps staff could forward those along as well as the printed
As
versions.
long as we can edit it, red line strikeout, correct changes.
And Ruben, thanks. Keep drinking that Red Bull, buddy.
And well done.
Sounds good.
Yes,
You
thank
did a lot of
you.
nitpicking, but this
Thank
is
you,
good.
thank you.
Good.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
to everyone.
Is there a
Yo.
motion to adjourn?
Move adjourn.
Okay.
Haley and Hogan, all those in favor of the motion to adjourn, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Bye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you all.
That was me as a little girl.